last week I made a short post, like an Instagram reel, on the fact that there's really only like four overarching variables to manage when it comes to pain in training, pain in general, right? The first overarching one is like what I would call physiologic load, or just overall workload on the individual. That someone cannot repetitively do more work than they are capable of, or are capable of recovering from, for too long without getting feedback from their body in the form of moans and groans and pain. And how that presents varies based on the individual context. But it really kind of boils down to, you have to start to look into how much work you're doing and make little adjustments. Getting acutely injured is often, either a freak accident, or like, somebody just gets smoked by a car and they break their leg, or they fall and they break their hip. Those things are, not really in our control often. But to some degree, the preparedness of a person is also going to dictate, whether or not like they get really hurt, right? Like, I work with some older clientele, and the stronger they get, the more conditioned they get, the less prone they are to having a bone break when they fall, right? Which, that's why being super physically prepared is really meaningful, right? So we have to take into consideration like the workload that people do and the level of preparedness that people are, right? The more prepared you are, the more work you can typically handle, right? So variable one is like, how much workload can this person tolerate? And we have to just start to manage that. And that's somewhat complicated, and there's more variables inside that. But if you're just the lay person trying to understand why they hurt or what to do when they're in pain with training, just starting to look at how much work you're doing and asking yourself, is this really working? Is this getting me where I want to go, or is this beating me up? That's a big question to answer. The second thing is the load of the exercises, right? So this contributes to the first piece, but like, if you have pain with squatting, but you can squat, with your body weight with 135 pounds, but once you get to a certain threshold, you start to have pain. That pain point is an indicator, or that level of weight is an indicator that you just can't tolerate that much work in that specific exercise. So one of the cool things about that is like, well, you can still squat. You just have to modify the load and continue to squat, like, and build up your capacity, right? You have to figure out maybe what are all the contributors. Again, you have to look at the overarching program that you're doing, but you have to just say, okay, well, this is a good sign. I can squat 185 for 5, but once I get to 225, I really can't. I have pain in my back or my knee or XYZ. So we can start to manipulate the load. The next thing is just the range of motion of the exercises. So hey, am I going through a full range of motion and it hurts through the bottom of the range of motion, or it hurts throughout? What about if I do an isometric? Oh, when I do no range of motion, meaning I just try to get into a position and contract, like an isometric exercise, that feels good. Basically eccentric work. So the lengthening contraction, it's not that simple, but it's the lengthening portion of the lift. That feels okay. But the concentric, or the contraction portion doesn't. So let's try to manage that, right? You can start to tease out all these variables based on the range of motion. And these things go hand in hand. Like, maybe you can partially squat 405, but full squat, you can only squat 225. Okay, we have to maybe use that partial squat as part of your training to develop some characteristic that you want, right? The other big piece is velocity, or the tempo. Force equals mass times acceleration. Force is what we would essentially call strength. The mass is the load, and the acceleration is, basically velocity and over time, meters per second squared, right? Well, just manipulating how fast you're moving can be a way to modify your pain and help you to keep training. Sometimes things respond to you moving quickly. Sometimes things don't respond to us moving quickly. Sometimes going really slow is actually more provocative. You have to tease those things out. But when you start to digest what's going on in your rehab and maybe start to manipulate some variables, the speed of contraction can be powerful. I mean, I strained my groin. Moving really fast didn't feel bad for my groin strain, but being in that position for a long time was not very tolerable. But I used things like isometric work at a low load where I spent some time under tension as a way to develop some conditioning. And I also used like moving fast in and out of a range of motion with lightweight as a way to develop some conditioning, right? So we can use the speed of the contraction or the speed of the activity we're doing to start to help ourselves, right? And then finally, the more you understand and the more variables you have to play around with, and the less you look at this stuff like some specific and perfect protocol that's going to fix you, and more like, you know, the fact that you're an organic creature that has a lot of variables that can be manipulated, the better things typically go. One of the best thinking patterns that people can have, or, you know, thought processes that people can have, is just the ability to adapt, right? Being adaptable when you're struggling is really, really powerful. Reframing what you're going through is really, really powerful. Understanding that, you know, like there's all sorts of variables that we can tweak, and that's good. You know, people kind of get frustrated by the fact that, oh, I wish there was just some simple quick fix. But if there's only one thing you could do ever, that would actually be pretty negative, because it would just mean that, like, if we couldn't adjust or make that fix on you, you would be screwed. So we want to pull all these levers. And I think just these overarching principles and variables, that they start to give you options, and options create a lot of opportunities to get better in different ways, right? So again, look at the overall stress on you as a human being. Hey, was work stress really high? Have you not been sleeping? Do you have a small kid that's been demanding a lot of your needs? Are you not able to train as much as you'd like, but when you do go train, you go hammer yourself, right? So look at your overarching workload. Look at where the load is and how much it is, right? So load and range of motion are often kind of exercise dependent, meaning, like, you know, a front squat range of motion, you might be able to squat deeper than you can squat with a low bar positioning, and that might be more irritable to your knees when you front squat versus when you low bar squat. Okay, we can move the weight around and we can change the range of motion. We can keep squatting, it just might not be as ideal or what you would want, right? The velocity matters, so starting to think about, how fast am I moving? If I move slow, does it feel better? If I move slow, then I want to slowly grade up my ability to move fast. If I can move fast, then I want to slowly build my ability to move slower and focus on time under tension. And then just, you know, calibrate your thinking around what you're going through, and try to manage your mind and try to understand more about, you know, what could be causing your symptoms, or at least contributing, because there's never usually a single cause, but what's contributing? How am I thinking about this problem? Am I catastrophizing it, meaning am I like making it out to be something that I can't bounce back from? And just try to develop confidence and understanding of what you're trying to do. And if you struggle with that type of thing, reach out to a rehab practitioner who can help you develop an optimistic mindset about what you're going through, because there's typically things that can be done. Hopefully this is helpful. That's all I got for today. Peace.